Hey, Max Kaiser. This is the Kaiser Report. Yeah, we're in Denver, 5,280 feet above sea level. Behind me is Devil's Peak and somebody's head, famous landmarks that define the skyline. And of course, this is where John Elway plays football occasionally, or he did a while ago. And the Denver Broncos, of course, nobody hears about them anymore because the New England Patriots are freaking great. Tom Brady's awesome, and who even talks about the Denver Broncos anymore? I haven't talked. Have you ever heard about the? Does anyone talk about the? No. Anyway, let's get into it.
That sounds like a fighter jet.
Sorry, I've just been recalled. I must go fight the enemy.
So, Max, by the way, you did start off with a little bit of cultural appropriation there by wearing those sunglasses. You bought those in the Navajo Nation gas station.
In New Mexico.
In New Mexico or somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Great American Pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Soon coming to RT, myself, Stephen Baldwin, traveling across America on a pilgrimage looking for the real America. It's like Simon and Garfunkel on crack.
Yes, yes, that is how many people describe it.
We got these at the convenience store, and there was a man there speaking Navajo.
Yeah. That was the first time I've heard anybody speak a Native American language.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It's awesomely large, the whole Navajo region. It's so big and so gorgeous. And then when you cross over to Colorado, it's like somebody pulled up a curtain and you see a wall of money.
A wall of money, a wall of snow and mountains. You have to do a lot of this.
New Mexico is not, they have no money. And Albuquerque is there, of course, that's so they make methamphetamines in the meth labs, according to Breaking Bad. We looked for that garage with $100 million in it, but we couldn't find it.
No, we couldn't find that. Of course, you know, when we're going through Navajo Nation, and it is massive, it starts in Arizona, it's in New Mexico. I don't know if it spreads into Colorado. Probably not, because these people are stingy with that sort of thing. They don't like to share. Maybe.
Well, the second you head over to Colorado, there's farming, there's cell towers, there's beautiful homes, and, you know, I don't know what they got going on over here, but it's clearly making them a lot of money. What is it, oil wealth? They just want to, obviously, it's an untapped resource in the Navajo Nation, you know, let the Navajos let them, you know, the treaties, forget the treaties. We need these people to help make America great again. Why not go to the original Americans, the original Native people? They know what makes America great again. Put a Navajo in the White House.
Well, that was my thought when we were driving through there, is I wonder what they think of this notion of make America great again. I'm sure they're like nodding like,
you guys messed it up. You know, it was great until white man showed up. I mean, basically, that was the subtext. I can just see the thought bubbles emanating from everyone's thought patterns as they're in there buying some beef jerky, thinking, yeah, that's right, make America great again. That's right, we told you. Remember Chief Seattle up in Washington? Basically,
that's a fake speech, but...
Remember that fake speech that never happened from non-existent chief up in Seattle? I remember it, or do I? I'm not sure. But the point is that he warned against the kind of...
In this fake speech.
Yeah, the fake speech warned against ecological devastation brought on by white guys ignoring the Mother Nature. And I think the white guys have done a good job ignoring Mother Nature. Just ask those folks in Puerto Rico or anywhere, Houston, or anywhere else getting devastated by hurricanes and tornadoes. That's the
white man. You can take off your sunglasses now, because those are off-putting to the audience who can't see your eyes.
1-800-WHITEY-DID-IT. It's my new book. 1-800-WHITEY-DID-IT. Get your free copy from Max Kaiser with Stacy Herbert, who does all the writing. But I'm on the cover as a photo. Are we gonna, you know, talk about stuff other than this?
The fake speech. The fake speech.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so what I was saying is, you know, we had talked in the previous episode about Puerto Rico having the Jones Act, which restricts them for what they could do, because from the outside, if people don't know the history, they can look at the Puerto Ricans and say, why is their economy in a shambles? They are no good. They don't work hard enough. But then you find out that we have these onerous, almost like sanction-like, you know, laws on them as a colony that they have to import things via U.S.-made, manned and flagged ships. In America, when we were passing through Navajo Nation, I was like, this is the most stunning landscape I've ever seen in all my years driving across America. And why don't they do something like eco-luxury lodges and charge people $1,500 a night to stay here and just see this amazing landscape? And you would see, they would have a house, like a trailer park, a little trailer, right there on the edge of a canyon with stunning scenery. And then I thought, probably in their treaty as like basically colonized people, there's some law that they can't do this sort of thing, that they are not allowed to have any sort of economic commerce.
Duh.
That's what I'm
It's
assuming.
a freaking open-air prison, like Gaza in the West Bank, right? It's the American open-air prison.
That's apparently.
Okay, so they can't just start a hotel if you're in prison. If I'm in
I don't
Rikers
know.
Island,
I
I
mean-
can't decide to open up a Krispy Kreme donut franchise in the middle of Rikers Island because I think, oh, the prisoners would love these donuts.
Well, I grew up in Connecticut near the Mohegan Reservation, which used to be very impoverished. Now it has Mohegan Sun, which is a casino which receives more visitors than any individual casino in Las Vegas. So they are able to do things. I don't know how they had to get some senator or legislator to overturn some of the treaties, but I don't know what the treaties are here. But in terms of the rest of the U.S. economy, we are often talking Marcus finance scandal, and we have talked to a lot of bears, not the sort of bears that roam in the Rockies. Those beautiful Rockies right behind us, we're gonna have to insert some sort of photo where you could actually see the Rockies. But there are the Rockies right there, and it's quite spectacular, but this big giant cloud is covering it. But
That's a cloud of marijuana smoke.
but we have a lot of bears on the show who say everything is a disaster in the U.S. economy. This is a story that is kind of gone unreported so far on Kaiser Report, and that is the latest Chicago PMI explodes higher, beats by 5 standard deviations. Everything is awesome again in Chicago, apparently, against expectations of a modest drop from 58.9 to 58.7. MNI's Chicago Business Barometer exploded higher to 65.2 in September. Here's the chart. You see it's exploding higher. Things are happening. And in fact, digging down into the data, Zero Hedge finds that under the hood, it's also awesome. Prices paid rose at a faster pace, signaling expansion. New orders rose at a faster pace, signaling expansion. Employment rose in the direction reverse, signaling expansion. Inventories rose in the direction reverse, signaling expansion. Supplier deliveries rose at a faster pace, signaling expansion. Production rose at a faster pace, signaling expansion. Order backlogs rose at a faster pace, signaling expansion. Business activity has been positive for 12 months over the past year. Number of components rising versus last month, 7. So the Chicago PMI is saying that actually this the Trump hysteria and the stock market's booming, that it's actually trickling down. Something seems to be happening, at least in the latest Chicago PMI.
PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index.
Yes, manufacturing index.
Which is another variation on a inflation index, right? It's like CMI, Consumer Index, CPI.
Yeah, and what has Janet Yellen been trying to do?
But at the wholesale level, it's like an inflation index at the wholesale level.
Yep.
So it's showing prices are going up. Right? The
Delivery orders are increasing.
Yep.
Deliveries are increasing. It's not just prices.
Yeah.
Like orders are coming in. People want more. They want this. Give it to us. Like things are happening.
Okay, so if the economy is increasing in velocity, as
Yeah.
we've been saying for a while, there's
Yeah.
dead, there's no velocity.
Yeah.
That means that interest rates are going to go up. Because if the demand for credit is going higher, then the price of credit, that is to say an interest rate, is going to go higher if the demand is going higher. Despite all the efforts of the central banks to kill the economy by keeping bankers solvent when they should have been declared bankrupt years ago, the index is showing that interest rates are going to go higher. This means 2 things. Number 1, property market's going to crash. And number 2, bond market's going to crash. Now, stock market might not crash as such, but it'll probably do poorly. But interest rates have been the genie that have been kept in the bottle through now, by some estimates, $25 trillion worth of financial oppression. That is to say, moving money from savers and workers to bankers on Wall Street. If that starts to unwind in an aggressive manner, then the bond market collapse that I've been misforecasting for 5 years now.
Many people have been misforecasting it for 37 years.
Well, at least 5 years, some 10 years.
Yeah.
But every financial pundit in the financial punditry space has been wrong about bonds for a good 5 years. But, this might be the bond apocalypse we've been waiting for.
To be fair, none of them imagined that central bankers would get so deranged and blow away all the textbooks and do things like quantitative easing, negative interest rates. That was never in any realm. Obviously, they weren't imaginative enough. These people who were bearish on bonds, who thought that the bond market would collapse, they didn't predict. They never could see into the mind. Even some of the people who already see central bankers as crazy, they didn't think they were that whacked. They thought that was not even possible.
Right, nobody saw negative interest rates.
Yeah.
And nobody saw the ECB, which is essentially the old Bundesbank, the German central bank, becoming a money printing, nutcase.
Yeah.
Given their track record with inflation that led to such the horribleness of the last century. But that all happened.
Now, you mentioned that if interest rates start to rise, I want to quickly, in the last 2 minutes here, less than 2 minutes, I want to mention that we're in Denver, obviously, because you could see those, the Rockies. No, you can't, but the Rockies are there. So the U.S. cities with the biggest housing bubbles. So we have the term housing bubble to describe the housing market that peaked in 2006 and imploded with spectacular effects has been gradually fading out of use. The current theme is that years of asset price inflation have healed the housing market and that the crazy peak of housing bubble 1 is now just some sort of normal base. Oh my. Well, he shows, this is from wolfstreet.com, and he shows this is one of the boomingest towns in America. They kind of missed out on the last housing bubble. This is 2006. They're 44% above, in real terms, house prices here.
That's what happens when you mix easy credit with marijuana. Okay, you got people down at the bank,
the munchies,
like smoking a big bad doobie, saying, lend me $2 million for this garage my neighbor wants to sell me, complete with a tricycle, and the banker's like, great.
They have the credit munchies.
They got the credit munchies.
Yeah.
And then the credit munchies are followed by the credit, the down slope. Get on the down low. Get down on the down low. I recommend if you're suffering from the downward trajectory of a post-credit munchie credit default swap induced nightmare, play a lot of Parliament Funkadelic. The funk, or James Brown, because that's what gets you back into your funky space. Brings you back up. Get the good foot on the one. We are the one. On that note, we got to go to the second half. Stay right there.
Europe has to either change or cease to exist. People who work in this building, the EU headquarters, should change the rules so that the European Union would have to work on fewer issues but with better results. It should be paying more attention to protecting external borders, fighting against terrorism, curbing illegal migration, as well as harmonizing economic policies and the judicial system. Otherwise, the Europe we have today is doomed. It will transform into a strange, loose community of 27 countries with nothing in common.
Los Angeles, the city of luxury and fame, but also an alarming number of people living in the streets.
The simple fact in LA is there's just not enough shelter. Even if people on the streets right now decided to come in, there's nowhere to come in.
It's been a struggle, but I'm hanging in there.
This man found his own response to the problem and constructed dozens of tiny homes for people in need of shelter.
When you have nothing and nowhere to go, having something like this may as well be a castle.
But do the authorities accept such solution?
A tiny house on a city parking space is not a solution. You have to have someone monitoring the site, otherwise it'll be a free-for-all.
And is there a better alternative to end the homelessness crisis?
Welcome back to the Kaiser Report with me, Stacy Herbert. Max Kaiser is on the road with Stephen Baldwin. I am here with Ellen Brown, author of Web of Debt. We get to speak in person. We're up in Aspen.
Great to be here.
How are you with the
Fabulous place.
altitude sickness?
I didn't notice, but did you?
Yeah, I had some the first
Really?
2 days. I was
What,
really
like
dizzy.
headache? Oh yeah.
No, dizzy.
Yeah.
So, but you know, you came in from Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about something happening there that you've been talking about for a long time. And I know this because of my friend Alex Schaefer, the artist of Burning Banks fame. Well, he's been very excited about the fact that apparently there's some sort of legislation passed or a motion passed in the Los Angeles Assembly about creating a public bank.
Yes, in the city of LA. So it'd be an LA City Bank. And there are two big reasons for the push. One is that there was this big divest LA movement where they wanted to, it was a bunch of young people. I love these young people. They've got so much enthusiasm. The troops have arrived, because most of us money reformers are
You're like a heroine
not
to
anymore.
these people, right?
Heroin, whatever.
Not an opioid.
Right, okay, hopefully. Anyway, so there was a movement to divest from Wells Fargo, of course,
Okay.
as in many other cities which have actually passed
Why were they
legislation.
saying we've got to get rid of Wells Fargo?
Okay, so they did these 2 million fraudulent accounts for one thing, and they were forcing the employees to do this or else leave, and some of those people were actually Wells Fargo employees, and so they managed to get the city council to agree to divest from Wells Fargo. But then the question is, where do you put your money if you don't put it in Wells Fargo? And so the obvious answer is a public bank. Really, there are no other banks that want big city money anymore. They're actually
Why is that?
Well, banks don't really lend their deposits anymore. They use the repo market, and they just create the money first, and then if they need the liquidity, they can go to the repo market.
And
or
Wells
the
Fargo
money
is a
market.
California bank, right?
Is it?
I know they have the stagecoach on the side, head
Yeah,
west.
it's west. That is a good point. And the other thing that's motivating it is this whole push for a cannabis bank. They're anticipating January 1st, cannabis is legal the shops will be open for anybody to buy it, not just medical cannabis. And so they're anticipating a $7 billion business and $1 billion in taxes.
This is a thing that has gone so crazy since I lived overseas for 20 years, and since I came back, everything's like Amsterdam here. It's crazy.
Well, that's in the States, and then you have this Fed thing. So you've got the federal, state. It's going to be very difficult to set up a cannabis bank. They've tried it in Colorado, and the feds have just won't allow it. And of course, you need to be in the federal system to be a bank. On the other, so
now you have a public bank they want to create. There is a public bank in Nebraska?
North Dakota.
North Dakota.
We have only one state-owned bank. But California has a bank, but it's an infrastructure bank. It's not a depository bank. It doesn't take deposits and
So
do
this
what
public
banks
bank-
do, create money on their books, which is what we're talking about.
So this public bank in Los Angeles would take deposits?
There's two lines of thought on that. The Bank of North Dakota model takes like 2% individual deposits. Mostly it's the state's own deposits. So it's really a bank. It's really a banker's bank. They partner with the local banks, and then the local banks go out and find the customers and do all that. They give low-cost loans, but they largely operate through the local banks. And that's the model that we've always talked about. But if you're going to take cannabis cash, you've got to change your model. But there are a lot of downsides to that too. So there are kind of two factions still working that out. So the state treasurer had a big panel on setting up a state-owned bank specifically for taking the cannabis cash because they want the tax money.
Yeah.
And there were many advocates who had great testimony. But there were two opponents, and the one that was quite compelling, unfortunately, was the head of the Bankers Association in Colorado, and he said, we wanted those deposits. I mean, this was not a banker objecting to a public bank. He said, we really tried to get those deposits, and the feds just wouldn't allow it. I mean, if you want to be in the federal system
and
at all.
that was under Obama's Fed. Now we have Trump, but Jeff Sessions is cracking down.
Yeah,
on all
exactly.
this.
It could get worse.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that the real answer has got to be litigation or Congress. I mean, either Congress has got to change the law, or we should litigate on states' rights, because there are a lot of states' rights issues right now. The feds have really gone overboard in taking over everything that the states used to do, like regulate banks for one thing. You used to have a state bank regulator, and now it's all.
But of course, in the Constitution, and many people like Ron Paul, who's just outside this door right now, he will talk about the fact that the Constitution mentions gold and silver as money, but really what that was about the states. The federal government didn't want the states creating huge debts that might draw the U.S. into war as a nation, because one state goes bust. And therefore, if you're going to issue any debt, it had to be backed by gold or silver. So how does the public bank fit into that sort of model of not wanting to create too many overseas debt obligations or whatever?
Well, that would be at a federal level, but I think they should turn the Federal Reserve into a truly federal bank. I mean, right now it's owned by, it's composed of 12 branches, all of which are 100% owned by the banks in their district, led by the New York Federal Reserve, which is obviously Wall Street. So they pretty much control the banking system. But if it were actually designed to and required to serve the interests of the public, not just preserve the banks, so that we actually had a public bank, I think that they should lend directly to the government. It's been done before. Right now, they can only buy government bonds on the open market, which means that the Wall Street banks or the bond dealers get their cut always, and then what the Federal Reserve holds in terms of debt, they return the interest to the government. There's this whole concern about, well, even like right now we're at a cryptocurrency conference, so.
Well, I was just going to naturally go to that, because you're talking about the Wall Street banks control the whole monetary system here in the United States. So it appears the people came up with their own end run around it. Instead of like begging officials and lobbying government to please change the law and please let us have a public bank, please let us have a more get outside of the Wall Street banks. Like, we don't want to pay them a toll every time we engage in our economy. Like, what do you think about cryptocurrency in terms of what structures have you seen there? I don't know how new or not you are, how long you've been following the cryptocurrency sector, but how does this fit?
I've been following you a long time, and therefore I know quite a bit.
How do you think it fits into your public bank model, like removing power from Wall Street?
Well, what particularly interests me, I don't know where you would actually put Bitcoin per se, but the whole cryptocurrency, blockchain, distributed ledgers that I'm not sure that you can even use a distributed. I mean, I've read that different banks say that the distributed ledger wouldn't really work for commercial trades if you're talking about one global distributed ledger, because it's slow and it's expensive. But you can have like sort of blocks of ledgers that then speak to each other. And this would definitely simplify things. I mean, just in the bank's own interest, they're doing it now. I think there's 75 banks that have signed up to Ripple or whatever. The central
suing
banks,
Ripple now.
Are they the banks?
Yeah, you know, bankers love lawsuits.
Really, for what?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's how they operate. So everything becomes drama with them.
And then the talk about a central bank digital currency, which I think is actually a good idea from the point of view of the central bank currently issues 5% of the money supply, which is paper money, and that's it. And then they have their own digital currency, but only banks are allowed to bank with the Federal Reserve.
Well, certainly with a blockchain sort of system, like I'm sure you saw, because this is a sort of story you follow, that the Bank of International Settlements, the central bank for central bankers, recently just announced in the past few weeks, like, oh, by the way, there might be $14 or $13 trillion more debt than we thought there was, and that's because we forgot to add all these forex derivatives. And like, you know, like on the blockchain, everything's transparent.
That's it, yeah. So it would be marvelous that you could track, like Catherine Austin Fitts talks about this $40 trillion that have gone missing. or 19 trillion, I don't know.
Trillions.
Yeah, trillions. You could track that money. I mean, if you can't track it back, at least you could track it forward. It can't happen again. You could make the transactions very fast, so you don't have all this counterparty risk and different ways you have to insure. You could get rid of a lot of derivatives, the derivatives that are all about changes in, the value of money just in the time it takes for a transaction.
Wait, here in the United States, it's like the banking system is way less advanced than Europe, even.
India, even, or Kenya.
Yeah.
Because
So-
they didn't have to break through this big infrastructure.
Exactly. Coming back
system.
here from Europe, which doesn't have the legacy, the powerful, very, very powerful bankers, even the United Kingdom is not as powerful as the British, as the American bankers. So here it's so slow, like molasses and old-fashioned. That's been the hardest to get used to being back here, other than the healthcare system. And I don't know why, if people could understand like how much easier and faster and smoother it is in the rest of the world, I don't know. But, I don't see, how Jamie Dimon, I know he's leading a campaign against Bitcoin and stuff. I think he understands what the threat of blockchain and Bitcoin is to his model. But do you see it being stopped here?
Well, if they had any sense, they'd leave it alone. But I know I'm on a panel coming up next, and the first question is, what should the central banks do about cryptocurrencies? Well, if the question is should, I would say do nothing and, let the market decide. But what they probably will do is either regulate it, as for example, the Chinese have now said no more ICOs, which are the equivalent of initial public offerings, but it's initial coin offerings, which aren't regulated. So, and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, I guess, is going to regulate the ICOs.
Yeah. I think China's coming out with their own crypto. That's my sense of
a lot of countries, I think, are coming out with their own central bank digital currency, which would be good in the sense that it's
easier to do fiscal stimulus.
Well, it's good for them, and it's good. It's actually a good way to do the dollar. I mean, we've only got 5% paper money anyway, and you're not going to. You'd have a rebellion on your hands if you tried to get rid of the 5%. I think, but the 95% is already digital. I mean, it's already somewhere in bank accounts. It would be if the Fed opened up both its lending windows and its deposit window for the general public so that we could all bank there. They've got a deep pocket. We can get rid of FDIC insurance. We can get rid of that part of the repo market that's just there to service all the people that have more than 250, or the funds and stuff that have more than $250,000, and so they're looking for a place to put their money. I mean, there are just many more efficiencies. You could get rid of bank runs and.
Well, that's a good way to end this episode. I hear Ron Paul trying to get into this room, take over our room here. So thank you so much, Ellen Brown, for being on the Kaiser Report.
Okay, great talking
I've
to you.
renamed
Thank
it
you.
Herbert Report. Do you like that name?
I do.
Okay. So that's it for this episode of the Kaiser Report with me, Stacy Herbert, and Max Kaiser. Thanks to our guest, Ellen Brown, author of Web of Debt. If you'd like to get in touch with us, tweet us at Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.